Hello, and welcome to Trans Truth, the podcast dedicated to dispelling myths, fear, and ignorance about transgender people. Along the way, we'll be sharing items of interest to the transgender community, from political and news events to health, fashion, and beauty. And now, let's have a look at some news items that should be of interest to our listeners. We're going to start off this news segment with our favorite kind of news story, the good kind. Last week, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed a bill that would have prevented students in public schools from using a bathroom for a sex different from their gender assigned at birth. Hobbs said in the message accompanying the veto on Thursday that she will, quote, veto every bill that aims to attack and harm children, unquote. She vetoed a similar hate bill last month that would have restricted the use of a student's pronouns consistent with their gender identity. Metro Weekly reports that Maryland Governor Wes Moore issued on June 6th an executive order declaring the state a safe haven for transgender people seeking out gender-affirming care. Among the important provisions in the order is a prohibition against state agencies complying with out-of-state subpoenas requesting information based solely on whether or not a patient has sought out or provided others with gender-affirming treatments. Said Governor Moore, quote, in the state of Maryland, nobody should have to justify their own humanity. This order is focused on ensuring Maryland is a safe place for gender-affirming care, especially as other states take misguided and hateful steps to make gender-affirming care cause for legal retribution. This action brings to 11 the number of states and the District of Columbia that have enacted legislation or executive orders to shield transgender youths who have been the frequent target of anti-science actions in red states. And in Topeka, Kansas, a TV station Fox 4 is reporting that transgender rights activists in Kansas are moving forward with plans to make Lawrence, Kansas, a political blue dot in a sea of red, a sanctuary city for transgender and non-binary people. Anyway, Justin Brace, the executive director of Transgender Kansas, says that we're hoping that we'll be able to set up physical meetings and get the item on the agenda and hopefully move forward with this piece of legislation soon. Not just in Lawrence, but everywhere. Brace also said that the group has been in contact with other cities about becoming sanctuary cities, including Topeka, Wichita, Overland Park, Manhattan, and Emporia. The goal is for cities to enact the policy before Senate Bill 180, which opponents have called the bathroom bill, goes into effect on July 1 and in direct contravention to all expert opinion, seeks to claim that gender identity means sex assigned at birth and nothing more. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, Missouri, the City Council has already passed, on an 11-1 vote, a similar ordinance making it clear that they will not prosecute under their state's recently passed ban on gender-affirming care. You know, I think I'm starting to see a pattern here. It's almost as if the decent human beings all lived in the bigger cities and university towns. One final news story, and this one has been troubling for me, and I'm going to ask Jeri Ann to weigh in on it in a moment. A women's spa in Washington State has been ordered by the state's Human Rights Commission to start admitting trans women. Olympus Spa is a family-owned operation with locations in Linwood and Tacoma. It is said to be modeled on Jimjilbang. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Anyway, that is a traditionally sex-segregated bathhouse unique to Korea. Part of the tradition, apparently, is mandatory nudity, at least for certain services. The owners of the spa had tried to sue the Washington State Human Rights Commission after being ordered to change their rules and admit pre-op trans woman Haven Wilvich. The Washington District Court Judge Barbara Jacobs Rothstein dismissed the lawsuit and upheld the ruling of the commission. In response to the complaint, spa president Sun Lee released a statement saying that, quote, "We firmly believe it is essential for the safety, legal protection, and well-being of our customers and employees that we maintain adherence to this adaptation of a females-only rule." Lee and owner Myun Woon Lee also said that they are both Christian and cited their faith as reasons as to why they did not wish to accommodate males in the facility. Well, here we are, starting another episode of Trans Truth. I am your host, Kelly, she, her, and I am joined, as almost always, by...
I'm Jeri Ann, she, her.
And today we're going to be talking about public perception. It's public attitudes, public perception is, in a word, skewed. In a few more words, misinformed. We have looked at several studies about public attitudes about transgender people in getting ready for this episode. So we're going to dive into that in just a minute. But before we do, Jeri Ann, what do you think about that story on the Olympus Spa?
Oh my gosh, Kelly, where do you dig up this stuff? I mean, you know what? That's such a mess. It'd take the best lawyer in the world, just a 5-gallon bucket of suds and a mop to clean up that mess. But here's the deal. Bottom line is, the law is the law, and these people maintain that the law somehow is going to interfere with the safety, the legal protection, and well-being of their customers. But they cited their faith as reasons as why they did not wish to accommodate males in the facility. Now, I have mixed emotions. I don't want to show my privates to anybody. So this is not a story for me that I can jump into. But when I pick this apart and I look at the law and I look at their response to law, I think, my gosh, what a mess. Now, I think the judge was right throughout the lawsuit, upheld the ruling of the commission, which I guess is law. But all this would have been averted if they had just gone to private club. There was a Mexican restaurant chain here in Houston, and they may still do this. You had to kind of on paper join their club in order to buy a margarita in there because they didn't have the liquor license so they claimed that they were a club, and they kept a list of members, and all you had to do was just sign your name on a piece of paper, kind of thing. And in most places, it's not that hard to just establish a club, and you circumvent some laws.
Right. Yeah, you can make different rules if you're a private club. This was not that. This was a public-facing business. And in Washington State, if we didn't make it clear before, you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of gender identity, regardless of your biological sex and your surgical status, to put not too fine a point on it. And go ahead.
Reading between the lines, it seems like this family, this couple, were just in opposition of that law. And of course they were, they have their business interest in mind, certainly, but this is just a stupid thing. If you run wildly into a fracas, you're liable to get smacked upside the head.
I agree. Now, to be clear, I want us to be clear. Both of us would be uncomfortable with a biological male, a pre-op trans woman, walking around nude in a room full of women. So, irrespective of the law, that's just us. Interestingly, I approached my spouse about this and asked her what she thought. And, I had to explain a couple times that, the law in Washington state is what it is and what this was about. And she said, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Now, my spouse is a cis woman. So, no accounting for taste, I guess.
No, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that business.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's my take on it.
Okay.
You ask.
Before we jump into our main topic, I have one more important announcement. Trans Truth will be doing a remote episode from the Houston Trans Pride celebration next Friday, June 23rd, at the Social Beer Garden on San Jacinto in Midtown Houston. Tickets are just $10, and the proceeds go to the Monica Roberts Resource Center. A link to the Eventbrite ticket site is in the episode notes on www.transtruth.info. Anyway, I was delighted to see this trans-specific Pride event being held. Nothing against our LGB allies, but the T community is admittedly tiny by comparison and tends to get lost amongst the traditional Pride events. And oh, by the way, if you're one of the 2 people who does not know the name Monica Roberts, before we lost her in autumn of 2020, she was a major trans activist. And I mean major. I'll put a couple of links to stories about her in the notes. But let me say that she was a force. You could not help but know that she was in the room. Anyway, the Resource Center, named after her, provides safe space, emergency transportation and relocation, and other service. So come join us at this very worthy event. You might even find your way into a Trans Truth episode. So I mentioned earlier that we've been looking at a number of surveys in recent weeks, kind of leading up to this episode, many of which conflict with each other when it comes to the number of Americans who approve or disapprove of this or that gender identity issue or question. We're going to look at a few of them, all of which are linked in the episode notes at www.transtruth.info, and see if we can figure out where the disparity is creeping in and why. In other cases, the questions are just too shallow to elicit an intelligent response, as is the case in our first example. A report from The Hill notes that a Gallup poll found that 69% of American respondents say that transgender athletes should only play on sports teams that match their birth gender. That's a 7-point increase from 2021. Just 26% said that transgender athletes should be able to play on teams that match their identity, an 8-point drop from 2021. We've noted before that the fairness of transgender athletes competing on a team that matches their gender identity is a complex and nuanced issue. A blanket, is it fair or not question ignores all that nuance. Let me say up front that in most athletic endeavors, an assigned male at birth athlete who has gone through male puberty cannot compete fairly with females who obviously did not. The assigned male at birth athlete will generally have longer bones and enjoy a distinct advantage in sports where that characteristic is advantageous. The time since medical transition is also a factor. Males who start taking male-to-female hormones will lose muscle mass, but an athlete with that male head start, if you will, with the right conditioning, can retain much of that advantage. But what about the male-to-female athlete that never had such an advantage because of smaller stature, etc.? What about the male-to-female athlete who transitioned before male puberty? Neither of these two groups will have an unfair advantage. As we're beginning to see, fairness requires assessment of much more than biological sex. To date, sadly, I have seen no readily workable solutions to this. Some have suggested that weight classes or a combination of weight, body fat percentage, and skeletal dimensions are the answer. I say perhaps, but under this scheme, an advantage that would be non-existent in one sport might provide a significant one in another. Bottom line, surveys like this and the conclusions they produce are frequently flawed. We need to do better.
My goodness, Kelly. You know, while you were talking, I was thinking about Olympic gymnasts. The physical differences in female and male Olympic gymnasts. What if you had an Olympic class female at birth gymnast who transitioned to male and wants to compete with the males? What would that look like? Now, some of those events, it's just sheer strength, but there is balance involved. I don't know. How about figure skating? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know enough about figure skating to be able to say that the skeletal geometry and center of balance differences between biological sexes would be a factor. My hunch is it is, but I don't know. Like I said, it's a very complex issue, and just looking at sex at birth is not a fair answer.
No, it's complicated.
So, a recent survey conducted by the Washington Post and the Kaiser Family Foundation is next up. Again, we have a link to it in the episode notes. It is fascinating reading. It's extensive, if a bit dry. So if you're a statistics or sociology nerd, it's good reading. If not, for the rest of you, let me warn you, it is tough sledding. Still, there are some things that we can probably approach here without too much geekiness. Here's the question that really jumped out at us. Question: which statement comes closer to your views, even if neither is exactly right? Whether someone is a man or a woman is determined by the sex they were assigned at birth, was the choice of 57% of the respondents. Someone can be a man or a woman even if that is different from the sex they were assigned at birth, 43%. Now, there was a marked difference in those percentages when the question was asked of an exclusively trans-identifying group, with percentages at 20% and 70% respectively for the same two questions. So 70% of the trans respondents said someone can be a man or a woman even if that is different from the sex they were assigned at birth. And only 20% said that whether someone is a man or a woman is determined by the sex they were assigned at birth.
Okay, stop there, Kelly. I find it hard to believe that 20% of an exclusively transgender audience or group responded that way. 1/5 of trans people
actually believe that your assigned at birth sex is your gender. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Arguably, the trans subjects are more informed on the current professional thinking on this, and our takeaway from this is that a much more concerted effort must be undertaken to change minds, especially among that 20%, I guess. It will be an uphill battle. I can't even count the number of times I've encountered the "it's just common sense" argument, even an indignant "it's science. If you were born with XY chromosomes, you're a man." That's what we're up against. Now, to be clear, the current professional thinking is that gender and biological sex are two different things, but you couldn't tell that from the answers to this survey or several like it. There is a huge gap in knowledge and understanding amongst the general public.
Kelly, let me interject something. You know, I moderate a transgender forum, and here lately there have been several posters in that forum. This is a members-only forum who have jumped out against transgender rights.
Yes,
Now,
I've seen them.
And, that's just hard to believe. So evidently we have some transphobic cross-dressers. Do we really have transphobic transgender people? And I'm speaking specifically of transsexuals. So
Sure, and
makes you wonder.
Well, I don't know about transphobic, but ignorant is certainly the case. I mean, I engage with the uninformed on a regular basis online, and I'm generalizing here, but an awful lot of them think that it's just a matter of opinion. They will bend themselves into a pretzel trying to rationalize their rejection of the overwhelming consensus of experts on the subject. So if anybody has any ideas on how to help people understand that, opinion is something everybody's entitled to, but not their own facts. A Pew research study we've linked in the episode notes comes at the question from a slightly different angle, but comes up with similar results, that most Americans still believe that gender and sex are the same thing. One interesting difference in the Pew numbers is that most Americans also believe that trans people should be protected from discrimination. Again, the dichotomy between the noble belief that we should be protected and the ignorant belief that gender is the same as biological sex is troubling. A recent story on Austin's KXAN notes that this year, trans people are enjoying a higher profile in pride celebrations and other events. The easy conclusion is that this is a good thing, strength in numbers and all that. But I wonder if being lumped in with the LGB community is, on balance, a good thing. To be sure, we currently suffer from a concerted campaign to deny our rights that is far beyond anything aimed at the LGBT community. And I will take some heat from some quarters for saying this. The LGBT community frequently does not understand or even respect our issues. I know you have some thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh, yes. I kind of take offense for certainly have an issue with the whole acronym LGBTQ plus or whatever community. I don't live in community with anybody. I live in a cul-de-sac. I work in my flower bed. I walk my puppy dog. I bake pies in my kitchen. My life does not intersect with LGBT people. I certainly don't live in a community. Now, I at one time went to church with primarily gay people, and on several occasions I was told that I would get along famously with someone's friend or an acquaintance of someone who brought this subject up to me. His name was Larry. Then I'm thinking, well, Larry bakes pies, or maybe he gardens, likes to fish, something like. No, Larry was a drag queen. This guy was comparing me to a drag queen, and he did this on several occasions. And then there was the lesbian woman that over coffee asked me what public restroom I used. So, yeah, you're right. LGBT people don't have a clue for the most part. I'm sure there's some informed people, but they don't know much more, if any, than the general population. It's been my experience.
Yep. I'm gonna jump ahead here just for a second. We should talk about media coverage of LGBTQ events. Invariably, come Pride Month, you see media footage of what?
You're going to see flamboyant gay people, leather boys, butchy biker, lesbian people, and that's fine. You do you. I don't have a problem with what they do, but we're talking about what the media covers, what the media sends into homes across America. And they're going to also show drag queens. It's going to be in your face, outrageous coverage is what I have experienced. Now, let me, if you don't mind me digressing a little bit more, I come from a very conservative area of Texas, where bigotry is the throwdown MO, and the three local TV stations, I can assure you, all that they will allow through their filter and into the homes in that area is that outrageous coverage of pride events.
Yep.
So
leather boys and drag queens.
there you go.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I see here you've got something labeled misinformation, and you're going to talk about Betty Crocker. How is Betty Crocker part of the problem?
Well, you've called me Betty Crocker before because I bake a lot. I mean, I just ordered another case of 100 pie pins just earlier today, and so you have referred to me as a Betty Crocker. Well, I got to thinking about it. I got curious the other day, so did some checking, and I found out that Betty Crocker was just a brainchild in an advertising campaign 102 years ago. I thought she was a real person.
She's not?
No.
Oh my,
no.
My world is shattered.
Well, I bet that most people surveyed would say that, yes, she was a real person, which points to the convincing power of advertising. We're talking about people's perception. And in particular, right now, we're talking about the influence of the media. And so what it boils down to is this. People form opinions and beliefs from what they're exposed to, whether it's based on truth or facts or not. Sometimes the absence of truth allows lies, legends, and disinformation. Now, Kelly, you used that term disinformation the other day, and I got to wonder, what does disinformation mean? Well, disinformation is wrong information put out intentionally to inflict harm or cause harm. So here's the deal. In terms of Betty Crocker, the absence of facts and truth resulted in misinformation, at least on my part, and I bet a lot of people. I thought she was a real person. Now, the difference between disinformation and misinformation is this. Disinformation is intentional, often with malice, and misinformation is unintentional. What we have seen in recent years is a promulgation of disinformation resulting in anti-trans legislation. It's like those that are peddling disinformation are preying on those that are misinformed.
That's exactly what's going on. And as we've noted in recent episodes, it's a concerted campaign of disinformation, preying on the fearful and ignorant.
You're entirely correct. And what are we going to do about it? I don't know. Aside from the eventual litigation of human rights, the only counter to disinformation is the promulgation of truth. It's the goal of every episode of our Trans Truth podcast.
I get it now. That's why we called it that.
Yeah.
So we agree. There's a serious dearth of information and understanding, and the ignorance is by and large not willful.
No, it's not. And we've been talking about media coverage a lot, in like news coverage and stuff. But there are other sources of input that sway public thinking also, even in the entertainment sector.
Nice segue, because I'm going to talk about the impact of will and grace. Before Will and Grace came along, there was, the gay rights issue was extremely polarizing. We were, at that time, barely a decade past the worst of the AIDS epidemic. and the ACT UP activists were still finding plenty of work to do. But when Will and Grace came along, I am firmly convinced that its success, and it was a wonderful show, brilliant writing, that did more to normalize gay people than any other campaign by far. The show's brilliant writing was so engaging that it almost certainly drew regular viewers from even socially conservative ranks. And what those ranks saw were people who, other than their romantic interests, lived normal lives, just like us. No drag queens, no parading leather boys, just people. By the end of their run, the Obergefell decision resulted in the legalization of same-sex marriage. That, I believe, was brought about certainly sooner, if in total, by the success of Will and Grace. So as the trans community, what do we have? A trans character on Orange is the New Black with the inescapable message that she's a convicted felon. Or I Am Jazz, a reality series about a borderline dysfunctional family with a trans daughter. Jazz, I love you, sweetie, but I don't believe that a reality show that, like most in the genre, deliberately amps up the drama is the impression I want to give the world about trans people. We just don't have a vehicle that can communicate who we are and who we are not, like Will and Grace did for the gay community.
Well said, Kelly. Yeah, so if you had the industry's best writers and producers and directors, what sitcom, what drama would benefit the trans community? What would be the subject? I mean,
I don't know. Without sensationalizing the trans aspect, I don't know what you would create that would have the success that Will and Grace did. Now, to be clear, there are other shows that have had trans characters. One that comes immediately to mind is Supergirl, the TV series from the DC Comics universe. They had a trans character, and it was just a normal person. But that's kind of a niche market. That's not primetime TV, if you will, on a major network.
I don't know. If the next episode was about me making gumbo, that'd be a real snoozer.
Well, we talked about you doing a cooking show. Yeah. Might be a place to start.
That's true.
Okay. Well, that is about all I have. You got any final thoughts?
No, I wish I could join you at the Pride event, but summertime is very busy for rodeo leadership, and I've got meetings lined up. And for those who are just tuning in for the first time, I volunteer with Houston Livestock and Show and Rodeo, maybe the largest philanthropic event on planet Earth. Over 2.5 million people will attend over a 3-week period, and when the dust settles, we will award $20-something million in scholarships to area youth. So, and I'm an officer for my volunteer rodeo team, 35,000 volunteers.
Fixing to get a promotion, I hear.
Well, maybe. We'll see. So anyway, good luck to you at that Pride event. Be careful. Try and stay indoors. It's going to be hot.
I will do that. It is going to be very hot. But like I said, people come down and join us if you can. $10 is a very worthy donation to a very worthy organization. You have been listening to Trans Truth, the podcast that speaks the truth about what it means to be transgender. If you are transgender yourself, you have a friend or loved one who is transgender, or if you are simply looking to understand more about the transgender experience, we hope that you have found this episode to be informative and enlightening. Copyright 2023 Trans Truth.